Good morning, CMSD scholars and caregivers and everyone joining us today. Today is June 3rd, 2020. And for today's segment, Mrs. Gus and I are going to be discussing with you Shakespeare. Okay, so for today's episode, all you need is a pencil or pen and some paper in order to answer the questions about Shakespeare.
And every year there is a unit in our springboard textbook in middle school, and each unit towards the end of the springboard book focuses on a different play or a different passage from Shakespeare. And we actually have a high school in Cleveland that's named Bard High School, and Bard High School is actually named after William Shakespeare.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Hello everyone, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for our pledge. All right, so today we're going to start with our standards. So these three standards should be very familiar with you throughout your middle school year. All right, so our first one is citing pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. So with this, we are really making sure that as we are reading and analyzing textual information, that we're supporting it with exact ideas coming from the text, not just our own ideas, but pieces of evidence. Okay, our next one is comparing and contrasting a written story, drama, or poem to an audio or filmed version. So with what we're going to be taking a look at today, we're going to be looking at a poem and then looking at a filmed version of it, and we're going to compare. All right, you also, within the packets that are sent home, are also looking at poetry this week. So we completely align with the packets coming home with you. All right, and the last standard is describe how a particular story's or drama's plot unfolds in a series of episodes, as well as how the characters respond or change as the plot moves towards a resolution. All right, let's remember plot is action. All right, so we're taking a look at a story and seeing how is it that these characters change as the action in the story tries to lead us to an ending. All right, so let's talk about who is William Shakespeare. So Shakespeare was born on April 26th, 1564 in England. So he was a playwright, an actor, and a poet. And you probably know him best for Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet and Macbeth. All right, so when he was young, he went to a grammar school where he learned poetry, history, Greek, and Latin. William was part of an acting company called Lord Chamberlain's Men. The acting company was in England, and at this time, they worked together to put on plays.
There were typically around 10 actors in a company, including a lead actor, character actors, and some comedians. Young boys typically played women's roles. Yes, you heard that right. Young boys typically played women's roles as women were not allowed to act. He died on April 23rd, 1616. His plays became very popular in London, and soon the Lord Chamberlain's Men were one of the most popular acting companies in the city. Some of Shakespeare's early plays include The Taming of the Shrew, Richard III, Romeo and Juliet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Shakespeare was also very famous for his poetry. He died on April 23rd, 1616.
William Shakespeare was an English poet and famous playwright, and is widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language. Although a great deal of mystery surrounds Shakespeare's life, it is documented that he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in the centre of England, and was baptised in 1564. He was probably educated in Stratford in the local grammar school, and then there is no record of him until he married Anne Hathaway in 1582. The couple had 3 children, and then 7 years passed, known as Shakespeare's lost years, where there is no documented record of him until he was noted as part of the London theatre scene in 1592. In 1592, Shakespeare's work was criticised by another playwright, which documented his career, although it is unknown when he began writing. Shakespeare's plays were performed solely by the Lord Chamberlain's Company from 1594, of which Shakespeare himself was one of the actors. After Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, the new king, James I, issued a royal patent to the company, and it was renamed the King's Men. The company built a new theatre on the south bank of the River Thames in London in 1599, called the Globe, which made Shakespeare a wealthy man. His plays began to be published in 1594, and by 1598 his name appeared on the title pages of the works. He continued writing until at least 1613, and died in 1616, survived by his wife and daughters. He is buried in the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, and his epitaph warns of a curse upon anyone who disturbs his remains. His works consist of some 38 plays, 154 sonnets, and several other poems. His plays have been translated into every major modern language, and his plays have been performed more than any other playwright in history.
Okay, so now you know a ton about William Shakespeare, and it's journal time, the best time of the segment. All right, during the time period of the 1500s, men would play women's roles because women were not allowed to act. Why do you think this was? How do you feel about this? If you lived during this time, do you think you would have gone along with this rule or opposed it? So I know you have a lot of opinions, and we love your opinions in journal writing. So as you're putting this together, remember complete sentences, sensory details, show, don't tell, and make sure your work is clear. Reread it when you're finished with it and read it aloud to someone in your home. Okay, so now you're going to take a look at two examples of two very different monologues. All right, the first monologue is a young girl who is performing as though she's Dory from Finding Nemo. But as you can see in the first monologue, she is actually saying out loud the words, her thoughts, her feelings. All right, in the second monologue, it's from A Christmas Story. And this is when Ralphie has gotten in trouble for using some bad language, and he has soap in his mouth. So the monologue is coming from the thoughts and feelings that are all swirling around in his head. But you can see it's coming from inside his brain and not necessarily a monologue of voice. Two very cool clips. Take a look.
No, you can't. Stop. Please don't go away. Please. No one's ever stuck with me for so long before. And if you leave, I remember things better with you. I do. Look, P. Sherman, 42. 42. I remember it. I do. It's there. I know it is. Because when I look at you, I can feel it. And I look at you, and I'm home. Please, I don't want that to go away. I don't want to forget.
Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur of soap. My personal preference is for Lux, but I found Palmolive had a nice, piquant after-dinner flavor, heady, but with just a touch of mellow smoothness. Lifebuoy, on the other hand.
You ready to tell me? All right. Where did you hear that word?
Now, I had heard that word at least 10 times a day from my old man. My father worked in profanity the way other artists might work in oils or clay. It was his true medium, a master. But I chickened out, and I blurted out the first name that came to mind.
Schwartz! Oh, I see.
Okay, so now we are going to transition into our Springboard textbook that we use in middle school, and we are going to listen to a monologue from The Twelfth Night, which is a Shakespearean piece that we analyze each year. So enjoy.
Monologue from Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. Duke Orsino. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting, the appetite may sicken and so die. That strain again, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came o'er my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough, no more. 'Tis not so sweet now as it was before. Oh, spirit of love, how quick and fresh art thou! notwithstanding thy capacity, receiveth as the sea, naught enters there of what validity and pitch soe'er, but falls into abatement and low price even in a minute. So full of shapes is fancy, that it alone is high fantastical.
If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. Oh, that strain again. Oh, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came over my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough, no more. It's not so sweet now as it was before. Oh, spirit of love. How quick and fresh art thou, that notwithstanding thy capacity receiveth as the sea. Naught enters there of what validity and pitch soe'er, but falls into abatement and low price, even in a minute. So full of shapes is fancy that it alone is high fantastical.
So now you've heard the poem and you got to see a video that put some pictures to help you with the meaning. But let's take a look, just in case it might still be a little fuzzy, of what did that actually mean? So if it's true that music makes people more in love, then the idea is to keep playing the music. Give me too much of it, so I'll get sick of it and stop loving. Play that part again. It sounded sad. Oh, it sounded like a sweet breeze blowing gently over a bank of violets, taking their scent with it. That's enough. Stop. It doesn't sound as sweet as it did before. Oh, love is so restless. It makes you want everything, but it makes you sick of things a minute later, no matter how good they are. Love is so vivid and fantastical that nothing compares to it. So really, this whole piece is surrounded by the idea of the emotion of love and the roller coaster and ups and downs, and piecing it together with the symbolism of music.
Okay, so every day in our ELA classes in middle school, we use context clues. And context clues can be used across the board, meaning social studies teachers use them, math teachers use them. Any class that you're in, you can always use context clues to figure out a vocabulary word or an academic vocabulary word. So with this context clue, we're going to look at one of the sentences from the monologue. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting, the appetite may sicken, and so die. Based on how the word surfeiting is used in the text, which of the following words match the meaning? A, inefficient, having too little. B, barren. C, overindulging, having too much. Or D, clumsy. So let's look at that sentence again. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting. The appetite may sicken and so die. So you need to look at all the words that are surrounding the word surfeiting, and also refer back to the visual of the monologue that you watched and the analysis of the monologue that we looked at in our Springboard book. Knowing all that background information is going to help you figure out what the word surfeiting means, and we'll give you a couple seconds to come up with an answer, and we will switch the slide. Okay, so now the reveal. Give me excess of it, that's surfeiting, the appetite may sicken, and so die. If you answer the letter C, overindulging, which means having too much of something, you were correct.
Okay, so now let's take a look at paraphrasing. So remember, paraphrasing is when you are taking a text and putting the words into your own meaning, your own saying, using your own words and not those from the text to retell the meaning. All right, so we're going to have you paraphrase the first 4 lines of the monologue in plain English. All right, again, you're putting your words in your own words to retell the story. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it. That
Surfeiting.
the appetite may sicken, and so die. That strain again, it had a dying fall. Okay, so if you're going to paraphrase these first couple lines, think back to the roller coaster. All right, so it's talking about how, yeah, it's true that music makes people more in love. So if that's the case, keep playing the music. But yeah,
you guys are at the age right now where you're experiencing what you think might be love or could be love. But like you know, with any relationship and anybody that you love, it goes up and it has its ups and downs. So when we were talking about, you know, the first 4 lines of this monologue, we decided that the first 4 lines meant
that, you know, sometimes you want that to continue playing on, and other times maybe you're having just a day and you're like, I'm sick of it, I don't want any more of this. And then you're sad. And so really, if you think about how music has so many different emotions throughout it, Shakespeare is comparing that and putting it together with the idea of love having so many ups and downs. And sometimes you're super happy and you want more and more, and others you're like, no, forget it.
And if you look at it too, now, I mean, it's 400 years ago that Shakespeare wrote this.
Yeah.
Not a lot has changed when you're analyzing the lyrics that you have on any of the songs that you listen to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of the time that we do with the lyrics when we're analyzing in class is we just pull up the lyrics to a song that one of our scholars will tell us that they like, and we always do the clean version. And then we look at those lines, you know, stanza by stanza or line by line, and a lot of the times middle schoolers don't realize how the lyrics to a song it's poetry. Yeah. And that's where it derives from, that's where it comes from. And when you're listening to a song at home or when you're walking or at your friend's house, you're really listening and analyzing poetry.
And making those connections to your own life. And I think what's cool about that too is that sometimes people can take the exact same words and have different thoughts about how they take meaning from that. So, you know, you and your best friend can read the exact same lines and, you know, she's saying, oh, yeah, this is what I think it means. And then your friend's saying, oh, that's not what it means. I took it like this, but you're both right.
And you could get in trouble doing that too.
Yeah.
if you look at the word and you're thinking one thing and I'm thinking the other thing, and that's what causes debate, and that's what causes analytical thinking and to generate ideas. And in 8th grade, so 7th graders get ready, we talk about nuance of words.
Yeah.
And so nuance of words is huge, especially when you're looking at interpreting, like Mrs. Fisher just said, different songs that you listen to, poetry that you might read, text, anything. Yeah. Well, especially text messages too. Because think about how often we read a text message and there's no tone or voice to it, but we might be interpreting it differently. I kind of think I got off on a tangent on that.
But no, and you know what's so funny is tone is what we're going to take a look at next.
Okay.
So we play right into this.
Okay, so which tone would you expect to find in a monologue by a man who is in love with a woman who refuses to see him? So remember tone, we were just talking about a lot of people, when they're reading a text message or reading a post on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you're on, sometimes we have a habit of putting a tone to it. We can be right, we can be wrong, but I think it's just a natural habit to kind of plug in a tone when you're reading, any kind of message. So let's look at that again. Which tone would you expect to find in a monologue by a man who is in love with a woman, but she refuses to even give him any attention? She refuses to see him. Would the tone be a playful tone, an optimistic tone, a sinister tone, or a somber tone? So playful, obviously you all know what that is. Optimistic means you're on the positive side, you're hopeful. Sinister is more devilish, you're angry. And somber would be sad. Okay, so if you and your family or your friends decided that the tone would be D, somber, you are correct. He would clearly be somber because she is refusing to see him and his heart is breaking. So he would be very sad.
Okay, so let's take a look at another example of context clues. So in the text, of what validity and pitch soe'er, which word has the closest meaning to the word validity? All right, so I want you also to think about the word validity, the word valid within it, and argumentative writing. And we're always talking about valid sources. So again, taking schema, taking background knowledge that you already know is something that helps you understand context clues in meaning. Okay, so A, does validity mean being right or valuable? B, showing fear? Or C, beautiful? Okay, so if you chose being right or valuable as the answer, A, you are correct. So again, going back to argumentative writing and citing sources, think of a valid source as a source that's correct, it's right, it's valuable. It's one that's a source in which you can use for argumentative writing.
And a lot of the time too in class we'll say, if you have a question about math, who has more validity? Our math teacher, Ms. Zarenko, or the ELA teachers, Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Gus?
Validity, valid.
Okay, so we have some more context clues. So one of the lines, and we do not say sentences when we are analyzing poetry or monologues, we count the lines, and that's how we refer to different parts of the piece. So one of the lines in the monologue says, but falls into abatement and low price. So based on what you remember about the monologue and based on the attitude, the tone, the voice, what might abatement mean in context? Which word has the closest meaning to the word abatement? A, showing strength. B, a kind or type. C, becoming weaker. So think about that. You have to also go back to the tone of the piece. But falls into abatement and low price. I think your key words in this line of the monologue are low price. Okay, so if you used your context clues correctly and you said that abatement means becoming weaker, you are, of course, correct. And Mrs. Fisher just had a good point about what abatement might mean in our classrooms or in real life. So she's going to give you an example.
So think about with this text, we are looking at Shakespeare's idea of love. And again, the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows. And think about all the times that you crisscross in the hallway that person that your heart is just so happy for, and then they say something that makes you mad, or they say something that makes you cry. All right, so then all of a sudden you're walking into the classroom and you've become upset and weak in love. All right, so no longer is there strength, but there's weakness to love at that point because you're very mad at that person that you like so much.
And you're feeling the abatement of that conversation or that expectation that you had. So in that case, where you were being ignored or you were feeling slighted, you would feel a sense of abatement.
Okay, so now let's take a second and let's check our understanding. So we are going to piece together the monologues that you took a look at in the beginning, the Finding Dory, the A Christmas Story, and the monologue from Twelfth Night. All right, so I want you to think about, how are they different? How are they alike? What visual and vocal techniques did you observe? And how are they effective in communicating meaning to an audience? Okay, so in 7th grade, when we are learning about monologues, learning about vocal techniques, the rise and fall, the emphasis on certain words within your monologue, and visuals, what do you see that helps put meaning to the words, especially with Shakespeare's Twelfth Night?
And with a lot of the time when we're presenting, we practice for months. And we look at posture, we listen to the pace of the piece, the tone, the attitude. Like Mrs. Fisher just said, some scholars will use props. Sometimes less is more with a monologue though. And what's cool is when we have written our monologues, our scholars were so nervous to present them that they would stand in front of the class or sit on a stool, and the other scholars in the classroom would see how nervous the presenter was. And I remember a couple years ago, my awesome 8th grade class, one scholar went up and sat next to my other scholars so that they wouldn't be nervous. And then it just was kind of like a domino effect. So anytime that they saw the person doing the monologue, another scholar would join them to give them that kind of support. So that was really cool too, because like Mrs. Fisher said, there's a lot of emotion with delicate monologues. And what you learned in the beginning of this lesson was how when you write a monologue, you're really pulling from your soul and you're really speaking through your heart. And a lot of times when you choose a topic, you're choosing a topic that has meant something to you or does mean something to you. So this is a great way to check for your understanding and to tie in, some of your real life experiences and how they can kind of rewind into the Shakespearean times.
So now take that piece of paper and use all the information that we've given you and write out, how are they different? How are they alike? The visual and vocal techniques that you observed. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a comedy called The Taming of the Shrew. And Shakespeare wrote this at the very beginning of his career in 1590. All right, the play's set in Italy, and it's the story of two daughters, both who are of age to marry. The younger daughter, Bianca, is beautiful and sweet and kind, and there are tons of men that all want to marry her. But her older sister, Catherine, so she's really beautiful also, but she is not nice. So she's a shrew, and that's a woman of a violent temper. So nobody wants to marry her because she might be beautiful, but she's rotten to be around. All right, so this is the story of a man who is interested in marrying her because she's rich, and he doesn't care that she's nasty to be around.
The Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. Chunk 1. Act 1. Scene 2. Padua, before Hortensio's house. Petruchio, shall I then come roundly to thee and wish thee to a shrewd, ill-favoured wife? Thou'dst thank me but a little for my counsel, and yet I'll promise thee she shall be rich, and very rich, but thou art too much my friend, and I'll not wish thee to her.
Signor Hortensio, twixt such friends as we, few words suffice, and therefore, if thou know one rich enough to be Petruchio's wife, as wealth is burden of my wooing dance, be she as foul as was Florentius' love, as old as Sibyl, and as cursed and shrewd as Socrates' Xanthip, or a worse, she moves me not, or not removes, at least, affection's edge in me, were she as rough as are the swelling Adriatic seas. I come to wive it wealthily in Padua, If wealthily, then happily in Padua. Sir, he tells you flatly what his mind is. Why, give him gold enough and marry him to a puppet or an aglet baby, or an old trot with ne'er a tooth in her head, though she have as many diseases as 52 horses. Why, nothing comes amiss, so money comes with all.
Petruchio, since we are stepped thus far in, I will continue that I broached in jest. I can, Petruchio, help thee to a wife with wealth enough, and young and beauteous, brought up as best becomes a gentlewoman. Her only fault, and that is fault enough, is that she is intolerable cursed, and shrewd and froward, so beyond all measure that, were my state far worser than it is, I would not wed her for a mine of gold.
Okay, so there's this chick named Bianca, and she's totally gorgeous, not to mention extremely hot, which means all the guys love her. More specifically, Grumio and Hortensio. They want to marry Bianca, but they can't because of the shrew.
This is Catherine. She's generally a horrible person. She's the kind of person who brings back Bojangles during lunch and doesn't share. Being a shrew, nobody is willing to wed her. So Baptista, the father of the year, wants Kate to get married before Bianca. So this gives people a little bit of motivation to get married to Kate, because otherwise nobody would.
That's where Petruchio comes in. Petruchio is kind of a jerk. He wants a wife who has a good deal of money. And this is great for Lucentio because he would be able to woo Bianca. He sets them up.
So Petruchio agrees to marry Kate, and with the scene not appropriate to show in English class, they are engaged. After showing up late at his own wedding, he sets off on an MTV-worthy journey of taming his wife. Meanwhile, Lucentio decides to become Bianca's tutor to be closer to her. Hortensio likes this idea and tries to be her music teacher to woo her also. However, Lucentio obviously wins her over.
Petruchio tames Kate and makes her a better person. In the end, they all come together and have a feast and celebrate as one big happy family.
Okay, after hearing the audio of this chunk 1 and seeing the clip, let's take a look at key ideas and details. What does Hortensio want in chunk 1 of the text? What does he say to Petruchio to get what he wants? All right, so think on this for a second. What does he want? All right, well, if you're thinking that he wants Petruchio to marry Catherine, you're right, he does. He wants her to marry him because he then will have a very rich wife. And remember, the idea here is that he's not going to care that she's mean and nasty and no fun to be around. It's the fact that she has rich and gold, that's what his eye is on.
Okay, so like we always do with our springboard and our analytical thinking and interpreting text, we check your understanding. So get your pencils or your pens ready, and obviously paper. You're going to write a summary of your interpretation of this scene. Use your own words, and that's what we talked about before when we were paraphrasing. Use descriptive details and complete sentence structure.
So a cool twist on this also is taking this version from so long ago and writing it into a modern day version. So taking this chunk that we watched this morning and we analyzed and rewrite it as though it was happening today in today's words. And of course be appropriate, but it can be really funny when you turn it into a modern version. So we hope that you've learned an awful lot about Shakespeare and poetry and context clues and paraphrasing here today.
So we will see you next week, next Wednesday, and we will be focusing on one of my favorite plays written by William Shakespeare called Hamlet, and you are in for a treat. My middle schoolers, my 6th graders love Hamlet.
It's very cool. And we have some really, really cool people from the community that are going to be showing you an awesome video next week. So have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.
Hi, my name is Tamara Zelwyn, and I am a 7th and 8th grade math teacher at Orchard STEM School. Today, I am going to teach you a lesson entitled Using Math to Make Masks and to Determine the Cost, Area, Cross Multiplication, and Multiplicative Thinking. I hope you enjoy the lesson. The goal of today's lesson is to determine the amount of square inches you will need for one mask, to convert that to yards, and then to calculate the cost of that mask using multiplicative reasoning as well as cross multiplication. I will model for you one example using prices from Joann Fabrics. Solid colors cost $3.49 per square yard, and patterned fabric costs $7.79 per square yard. The cost of elastic is 99 cents per yard, and a sewing kit, which we will use not only for this mask but for future use, costs $16.99 per kit. So let's watch one video about how to make some masks.
Hello from quarantine here in New York City. I wanted to pop on here and share a quick tutorial with you guys if you're interested for how to make your own face masks. The hashtag masks for all has been trending because some experts think it's a good idea to wear a mask no matter who you are or where you're going. I know there are 1,000 different opinions about what's the right thing to do, but since I feel like the really high-grade professional masks should be saved for our healthcare professionals, I have the materials to make these here. So I wanted to do a couple for myself, my family, the essential workers that I come in contact with every day, like the people who work in our building, the people who work at the grocery store, and if there are any health professionals watching this who could use these, they're better than nothing. So send me a DM, leave a comment, and I'll figure out a way to make these and get them to you. I'm going to show you how to make these out of scraps that you probably already have around your house, and we're going to make them with ties versus the elastic that goes around your ears. That way, if you're making them for other people, it's a little bit easier to customize and make sure you get a good fit. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is make these ties. This is a really easy trick. Just find an old pair of leggings. I have these old bike shorts that don't fit Charlotte anymore, and cut them into 1-inch strips. This sort of stretchy jersey fabric will roll if you pull on it, so just give each one a really good tug and watch it just completely coil into like the perfect stretchy soft elastic cord. Next, you can pick the material that you're going to make your mask out of. If you're a crafter like me, you probably have lots of different scraps of fabric. I've also made masks using upcycled clothing. I made a mask using this flannel from my husband, and it's really soft and actually pretty cute. Once you decide what you're going to use, cut out 2 6-inch by 9-inch rectangles and set aside 4 of those ties that you made. Put one of the rectangles right side up on a flat surface and put one of those ties in each of the corners. You want the ties in towards the middle instead of being out, because we're going to sew around this and turn it inside out, and that's how it's going to work. I like to make sure they're all bunched in the middle. That way I know that the perimeter of the rectangle is clear, and then I'm not going to sew over any of those ties. Put your second piece of fabric right side down on top of that. I like to clip the sides first to make sure everything's in place, and then go ahead and re-clip the corners to make sure that all 3 of those layers are in place. I also like to mark a little bit of a gap so I know exactly where I need to not sew so that I can turn this inside out. And then I'm going to start right there at the bottom of the gap and sew around this completely. I'm doing this on my sewing machine. I guess you can do this by hand, it would just take you a little bit longer. Sew around the entire thing, leaving that gap. Backstitch at the front and back so everything is really secure. And then take that off and turn it right side out. I'm going to put this on my little ironing board to make sure it's smooth. Once you've turned everything right side out, find the hole and just iron in those edges so that you know that you can sew over them later. And then you're just going to fold 2 pleats, which basically just means folding up the bottom and clipping it and folding it up one more time to make 3 little rows. That's going to let the mask sort of expand over your nose and your chin without just being a flat piece of fabric. So fold those up. It might take you a couple tries to get them even, but that's okay, just re-clip them if you need. I'm going to bring this back to the sewing machine and just sew around the entire rectangle again, and then we're done. Here is our finished product. It expands like this to cover your nose and your chin. I like these because they're machine washable. Whenever I get home, I just throw them right into the wash so that I know that they're clean. We go outside about once a week for groceries and just 15 minutes to stretch our legs in the park. As long as no one is around and we don't touch anything. So here we can get some fresh air without a mask and without the cover on the stroller. And I guess this is our 4th week quarantine, so this is our 4th outing. Sometimes you forget it's spring. This is right down the street from us. This is one of the trailers that are carrying the victims, and it is heartbreaking. It's frustrating when you read some things on the internet from people who don't live here, saying that it's not as bad as it is. It's bad. It's really grim. And every little thing you could do to protect yourself and other people is worth it in my opinion. So I feel a little bit more protected, which is saying a lot considering the circumstances. So I'm very pleased with how this turned out. I hope you are all staying happy and healthy and as safe as you possibly can. I'm thinking about you, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.
So we know that our mask is 6 inches by 9 inches. And we're going to go to Joann Fabrics, and we are going to find out how much it costs to make a mask with these dimensions. Joann Fabrics sells their fabric with yards, so we need to do a conversion. So 6 inches, we don't know how many yards that is, so we have to figure that out using this ratio. 36 inches in 1 yard. And we know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot, and there are 3 feet in 1 yard, so 12 times 3 gives us 36, and that's where this conversion comes from. So let's look at the relationship between the 6 and the 36 using multiplicative reasoning. So I know that 36 divided by 6 gives me 6, or 6 times 6 gives me 36. So I'm going to use that same reasoning to figure out how many yards there are. So 1 yard, doing the same kind of thinking, divided by 6 gives us 1/6 yards. So therefore 1/6 yards is equal to 6 inches. So that's going to be the length of my mask. We know that the width of the mask is 9 inches. So let's do the same conversion. We don't know how many yards they are, 9 inches is, so we're going to use X yards. And we'll use that same 36 inches over 1 yard. Now again, I want to point out I have my inches on top in both of those ratios. So I'm going to use multiplicative reasoning again to figure out what did I multiply 9 inches by to get 36. And I can think of that as division also, and 36 divided by 4 is 9. So I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, and I get 1 yard divided by 4 is 1/4 of a yard equals 9 inches, which is the width. So to find the area of a rectangle, we still do, as we learned in previous lessons, length times width. So if the length is 1/6 of a yard and the width is 1/4 of a yard, we end up multiplying those together and we get 1/24 square yards. And we will use that to figure out the cost of our mask. I can also solve this ratio of 6 inches over X yards equals 36 inches over 1 yard using a traditional method called cross products, where we circle the diagonals. And if you do it this way, we end up with 6 inches times 1 equals 36 inches times x. 6 times 1 is 6 equals 36x. Divide both sides by the coefficient 36, and we end up getting 6/36, which is the same as 1/6 for your length. And if we do the same thing with 9 inches over x yards equals 36 inches over 1 yard and use cross multiplication, we get 9 times 1 equals 36 times x. 9 equals 36x. Divide both sides of the equation by 36, and 9/36 is equal to 1/4, which is what is equal to x, which is the width. And again, the area is length times width. Well, the length is 1/6 of a yard, and the width is 1/4 of a yard. So we multiply those together and we get 1/24 square yards, which again we'll use to figure out the cost of one mask. So again, the area of one mask is 1/24 square yards. We need to figure the cost out, so we'll just put an X there with a $sign for cost. And we know that the cost of the fabric is 1 yard of fabric costs $3.49. So when I look at this, I know that I am going to multiply this 1/24 by 24 to get 1, but I don't really know in my mind what I would multiply x by to get 24. So I'm going to do multiplicative reasoning, and instead of multiplying x by 24, I'm going to divide by 24. And when I do that math, I get $3.49 divided by 24, which is about equal to 15 cents per mask. I can do that also with cross products. And just multiply those two. 1/24 times $3.49, then divide that by 1, and that will still give us about 15 cents per mask. According to one website, one mask needs 14 inches of elastic. So we'll use that ratio to figure out how many masks we would need with 3 yards. I'm sorry, with 1 yard. And you remember from before that 1 yard was 36 inches. So when I look at this, I don't really see any number I can easily multiply 14 by to get 36. So I'm going to use cross multiplication. So I'm going to multiply 1 by 36. And then I'm going to multiply 14 by x and set those equal to each other. So 36 equals 14 times x. Divide both sides by 14. Those will cancel, and x is equal to 2.57 masks. Well, I can't really make part of a mask, so I can make with 1 yard, I can make 2 full masks. So I'm going to put that down. And we know that the elastic costs 99 cents for 1 yard. So for, we can make 2 masks with 1 yard. So for 1 mask, I know I can make, it will cost about 50 cents for 1 mask. So going back to the cost of fabric, it was 15 cents for 1 mask, plus the elastic, which we said was about 50 cents per mask, plus that costly sewing kit, which was $16.99. I mean, we can use that again, but we're going to need to figure out the cost of that included. Gives us $17.54 for the cost of one mask. So let's watch how Sarah D. Riley, an up-and-coming 8th grader from Orchard STEM School, designs a mask.
Let's begin. To do this project, I need to complete 3 simple steps, starting with measurements. Second is browsing, to determine what fabric I want to use to make the mask. And lastly, do the math. I also need to find out how much money I use. Measurement. First, I used my measuring tape to find the length of my face, which is 5 inches. Then I did the same to measure the width, which equals 6 inches. Fabric browsing. While browsing, I found some cotton that was selling for 280 centimeters for 22 cents, so I then had to convert that into inches. Math. I then have to multiply 280 and 0.39 and my answer is 110, which means all that's now left to do is subtract the total inches that I need to make my mask. Because the width is 6 inches and the length is 5 inches, I'll also multiply them together to get the amount needed to cover my mouth and nose fully. My answer is 30 inches squared, subtracted from 110 inches squared. That means I have 80 inches squared left over to make extras. Conclusion. I've learned that measurements have to be specific for something to fit. All measuring units can either be squared or cubed, and with the 8 inches squared cotton fabric I have left, I can make 2 more masks in my size. In summary, to complete this project, I needed to have the right measurements, browse the internet, and do the math. My name is Sarah D. Riley. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.
Good morning, CMSD scholars and families. Today we're going to learn a great way to keep your brain and body engaged, improve your mood, and challenge yourself, as well as others. Juggling is an ancient form of exercise and entertainment. Women jugglers were depicted in tomb drawings in ancient Egyptian civilizations. Juggling stimulates the brain. It improves reaction time, reflexes, spatial awareness, strategic thinking, and can dramatically improve your focus and concentration. When juggling, always be sure to use items that are safe and where your surroundings are safe, where you're not going to be harmed or you're not going to break anything. I've given some examples from around the house that I have found. As you can see, I have a couple tennis balls. I have some stuffed animals that can be easily used for juggling and are safe. I have a couple bean bags, just kids' toys that can be used. I have some balled up socks, which work great, are very safe, and you should have those at home. I have a couple little Smurfs. These work really well if you're just sitting on the couch and you're practicing a little bit of mindfulness. And last, I gathered a few army guys that can be used left, right, right, left as well. Again, make sure you're in a safe space and using items that are safe. So let's get started. When we're juggling, we can typically start left or right to left and left to right. This works the left side of our brain and the right side of our brain, and it also helps us to be ambidextrous, which means the left hand and the right hand work equally as well. Then, after you've gone right to left and left to right, you can work on one hand. You can start with one hand actually. And when you're comfortable, work on the dominant hand and the non-dominant hand. And then you can take those two skills and move on to the next skill. So here I'm going to put 2 in one hand in my dominant hand. I'm going to get a nice stance and be comfortable. And I'm going to throw the first one in the air. When that one's coming down, I'm going to make sure the second one's in the air. Now that's with my dominant hand. So it's quite a challenge, even with my dominant hand, to pick up that skill. Now I'm going to try my non-dominant hand, which means the hand that I use less and that is not equal to my dominant hand. As you can see, it's quite a challenge. So this is the hand that I would want to practice more and challenge myself to get better. Once you feel that you have mastered left to right with both hands or 2 in one hand with one hand, you can move on to 3. Let's try with our socks. So it's the same concept. We have 1 in one hand and 2 in the other hand. Typically, you want to start with your dominant hand, the hand that you're most comfortable with. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to throw the first one here just like I did when I did 2. And then we're going to work left to right, always having 1 in the air. As you can see, it's quite a challenge. Okay, I'm going to try with some tennis balls, see how I do. As you can see, juggling is very difficult. It's challenging, and you can progress at your own pace, speed, and with whatever items you feel comfortable doing with. It keeps your mind going, it keeps your body engaged. It works the left and the right side of your body. It improves hand-eye coordination. It boosts your confidence and your athletic ability. And juggling doesn't discriminate by your age, by your size, by your gender, or your athletic ability. The benefits of juggling persist even weeks without practice. So, get started. Challenge yourself. Work your non-dominant hand. Challenge others. Be creative and have some fun.